Tabletop reviews are a requirement of ISO 27001 and basically a requirement of SOC 2. It's a advised practice. What is a tabletop review? How do you prove you had one, and what kind of goes on when you do it?
There are a few different kinds. There's typically what's called a disaster recovery exercise, and then there's an incident response plan test. So your disaster recovery exercise, someone facilitating the exercise will present a disaster. It might be something like AWS US East goes down, it's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, and then you walk through that scenario as a team. You talk about everything from who you'd call to what you'd change, how you communicate to your customers. In that example, you probably don't need to communicate with outside counsel, but in others you might need to. So literally it's that a facilitator, typically an outside impartial party, is going to present a scenario, and the entire team who's involved in recovery is going to walk through what you would do to recover. During that exercise, you're going to identify gaps in your process. A facilitator will help with this as well, with the questions they ask and the notes they take. And you're going to determine for any of the scenarios that you run, if this had happened for real, how quickly could we have gotten back online? Is there a gap? Does our process say we call Amir, but he might be on a plane? Do we have a document somewhere that says that we call Amir, but he's no longer with the company, right? And we find these things all the time in these recovery exercises. So that's the disaster recovery exercise. The incident response plan test is another separate exercise that's also required. Some companies run them as one exercise, but they meet two different requirements. And the incident response plan test is, as you'd imagine, it's a test of your incident response plan. So this gets triggered in the event of a data breach or really data exposure. People think of data breach just as a hacker's in my network, but your incident response plan also gets triggered if one of your employees accidentally emails your client list to a reporter, right? Anything like this. And it's going to be a process of identifying what happened, of triage and control. This is going to include remediation and investigation. This is where almost certainly lawyers are involved. And again, it's a process of understanding who on the team needs to be there, what you would do. And it also tends to uncover missing things like, are you doing the logging you need to conduct an investigation? Have you built your application in a way to make this as painless as possible? I was doing an exercise a few weeks ago with a client, and they were just storing a huge amount of unnecessary metadata that they didn't need. And so when we talked through a hypothetical data breach, not only was, X data exposed, which they did need, but so was another 10x of data that they didn't need in the first place. And so they just made their own data breach so much worse by storing that. So all that's what gets uncovered in an incident response plan test.